Hello, and welcome to the Futurum Tech Webcast. I'm your host, Shelly Kramer, and I'm joined today by my business partner and daily partner in crime, Daniel Newman. Hello, we so rarely make time to do this together. That's terrible.
Yeah, we could be way better at this, but the
We,
good news is we're pulling it off on this Friday, and
we are.
about something that I think is near and dear to every business leader, owner, and employee's heart.
Absolutely. So we're here today to talk a little bit about Microsoft's newly announced Viva. Daniel, maybe take it away and tell us a little bit about what Microsoft Viva is.
Yeah, absolutely. So, we've heard more and more throughout this last year with the pandemic. People feel more distant, more disconnected from work and life and from their employees. And sure, we have technologies, of course, like Microsoft Teams and others, the Zoom boom and the Cisco WebEx boom. But essentially, we've been using remote tools to connect. And collaboration has become one part of the experience of working together. Microsoft benefited bigly. That's my new favorite word from the boom towards remote work. Teams saw its numbers grow from like 10 to 115 plus million in a matter of months. Big part of the business. The problem is, as many of us have experienced, I know I have, I'm guessing you probably have, remote work is fulfilling, but not always fulfilling in the same way for everyone. And it can be very complicated. People who are used to going into an office and used to connecting and seeing people and having sidebar meetings, water cooler discussions, breakouts, lunch in a cafeteria, that stuff's been gone for a long time.
Right.
And technology is really a vehicle. It's a platform to bring people together. So it's not just about meetings. It's not just about making better meetings, which has been something a lot of technology companies, including Microsoft, has done. So Viva really is a multi-module approach that the company's taking to experience. And we've heard the experience term, a lot of buzz around that. They're talking about connecting people, right? How do you use the different platforms in the organization? In their case, things like Yammer and Teams that I mentioned, SharePoint, Insights. What kind of data can be extracted from yourself, for the managers, and of course for the company leaders to better understand their organization, to enable this kind of work to be as productive as possible. You've got learning, right? So we've seen a lot of companies make different passes at learning modules and tools, and including LinkedIn, which, hey, we're on right now, which is, been very invested in creating modules and platforms, but not necessarily done on an organization scale.
Right.
How can the company help? And then, topics is kind of all about, curation. How do you get the right people in front of the right information so that the knowledge center of a company can work collectively? So I basically just gave the whole thing in 2 minutes, but that's the big idea. The big idea is moving from meetings to experiences and pulling all the parts together that are required to do that.
Well, and I think to step back a little bit from those individual components, I think that what we face as business leaders, certainly us as business owners, we have a special set of circumstances in that our team has been remote and working virtual for decades. Okay, so we're experts at this, and the pandemic didn't necessarily change that about it for us. What it did change, though, is that we get our fix by getting up on stages and doing keynotes and attending client events and having dinners and different things where we actually have human to human, people to people contact. And even us, experts at remote work, I think all of our team would admit that, sometimes we're just tired and we miss those other things that are part of our work experience. And so for people who aren't accustomed to this, who are now going into almost a full year of remote work and feeling disconnected, I think their experiences are even more magnified than ours. And I think that too, the real challenge that organizations have is that happy employees are productive and efficient, and they deliver great customer service and great customer experiences, and they stay.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to, as business leaders, be focused on employee connection and employee well-being, because if you don't, an employee engagement, because when you don't have all those things as an integral foundation of your business, then you churn through employees. And I think that it has a really big impact on the bottom line. So I see a lot of what Viva is doing, or what Microsoft is doing with Viva, is attempting to get arms around the reality of, I think their tagline is, employee experience platform designed to help people connect, focus, learn, and thrive at work. And you can't really just have one of those things. It's not really just about connecting, you know? And I think that's really where it's interesting. And, you know, you touched on some of these individual modules. You know, Viva Connections is, you know, a way to give employees sort of a curated, company branded experience that gives them news and conversation and other resources that make it easy for people to publish information into that connection stream from SharePoint or Yammer or the Microsoft team, the Microsoft Stream, and to kind of support everybody and connect everybody, which I think is kind of cool. Another thing that the Connections does that I thought was really cool, you can reach specific departments or regions or roles within the company. Okay, so we have a small company. And even then, you know, sometimes we do some messages to everybody and some messages just to analysts or whatever. But, you know, at the enterprise level, when you need to reach everybody within this particular part of the organization, I think it's kind of cool to be able to target your audience. And another thing I thought that was cool about this functionality was that you can boost a piece of content, much like we're all familiar with in social. And so that piece of content will remain at the top of the news feed until you can see that it's been read or that they've seen that they've accomplished a certain number of impressions. So think about that, though. Think about, you know, you have hundreds of thousands of employees and you're trying to get a message out, and having a mechanism for seeing that, you know, 75% of people within the organization have seen this message. I think that's a really valuable piece of technology that they're integrating in there, you know?
Yeah, I mean, employee portals have sort of been this hodgepodge for a long time.
Yeah,
What do you see when you arrive and you turn on your computer? And companies have done more and more with that, you know, through like SharePoint and tools that companies like Microsoft have been building for a long time. And this is definitely something that needed a facelift, right? We
yeah,
saw the facelift of new collaboration technologies and improvements that were made over the last year. But what we didn't really see was the addressing the holistic work experience
right.
through a single tool. And Microsoft was really well primed to do this. And you know, it was interesting. Microsoft did a work trend index, and it was something like 60% of workers they found were less connected to work now than they were, you know, pre-pandemic.
That's
We
a big
did.
number. I mean, that's a big number.
It's a huge number. I mean, it's more than half your employees. And
Yeah,
and of course, I would also you know, if I had to read between the lines, which is, you know, as an analyst, and I started breaking demographics, I bet a lot of those are you know, your middle management, your
right.
frontline workers, people that are used to really having a very connected, engaged work experience, working with teams, getting feedback from their leadership that aren't getting that as in real time. And we all know that our work volume has picked up. Anybody that's been working at home, and by the way, that's a real benefit. If you have the kind of job that allowed you to work at home, you know, you should feel a little bit lucky because that was a really fortunate
Right.
circumstance throughout this. But I think we all saw we didn't work less. We didn't embrace being at home in the sense of like, oh, this is great. I'm going to go watch TV at lunch. I mean,
Right.
it was like now we can just meet every 30 minutes because you're never traveling.
Right.
So,
Right.
you know, and we've done extensive research at Futurum, right? Our digital transformation index. We look at what enables companies to be successful transformation. And we see
Right.
things like, you know, management support and budget. And then, of course, we see things like great technology partnerships. But one thing that's always risen to the top, this has been something in all the research, qualitative and quantitative we've done in books, in our reports, culture. And culture was greatly impacted by COVID and by the impact it had on work. Companies that had those really, you know, the intimate, in-present cultures, the companies that invested all that money to create cool workspaces. I mean, where is all that now? I mean, for
Yeah.
a year, they haven't been using it. So kind of
Right.
wrapping it up and maybe taking the next direction too is Microsoft with the M365 platform
Yeah.
was really well situated to deliver something like this because, you know, you have people using, for instance, this runs right out of environments you're using every day. You could be
Right.
using Teams, you could be using SharePoint, you could be using any Microsoft 365 apps, and it all starts tying together. You're in the Edge browser. You could hit your browser just like going to a website and be part. Uh, you know, you could become entrenched in this experience. And so, you know, there's 3 or 4 things that are really interesting, and that's just like for the UX.
Right.
Shelly, and I'd love for you to touch on this, but the analytics stuff I thought was super duper interesting because I think a lot of us are so busy, we haven't spent much time reflecting. And if you're an individual, we need some self actualization. And if you're
Right.
a manager or a leader, you also need that same actualization. That data, just seeing how many people, how many minutes people are in meetings or how many meetings they're
Right.
having, is not an indicator of productivity.
It is definitely not an indicator of productivity. Speaking of data points that are relevant, this is specific to the Viva Topics module. And one of the things that Microsoft brought to the fore on this is that employees on average spend more than an hour a day looking for or recreating information that already exists within the organization, which is more than triple what they spent 5 years ago. Okay, so to be fair, there's more information in all systems today than there was 5 years ago, right? But I mean, I think about even our small organization, Daniel, and how many times you and I go, I know that exists. Where is it, or whatever? So imagine that multiplied across. But I think that the Viva Insights part of this, which is focused on employee well-being, enabling productivity, innovation, and engagement at work, is really tied to the fact that people with low engagement, and we touched on this a minute ago, people with low engagement within the organization, people who don't have a good sense of well-being are not the people who are going to stay. They're more apt to leave. And so, what leaders are, in every bit of research that we do, including our digital transformation index, every bit of research that we've done in the last year has indicated that employee well-being is very, very high on the list of business leaders' concerns because they know that people are stressed. Here's a data point from December 2020. This comes from Microsoft. The study found that 75% of US employees experience burnout, 70% reported higher stress, and more than half reported elevated levels of anxiety. So we're all being impacted in different ways by a pandemic. And that's really where this insights part of the module makes sense because it's focused on creating a culture where people, I don't know if you have an app. I know you don't have an Apple Watch, Daniel, but when you have an Apple, because you're a watch snob and you like fancy watches, but the Apple Watch rather will, show you, stop and take a breath. And there's different mindfulness apps and things like that you can create to just sort of step back from what it is you're doing and take a minute to breathe and to recenter yourself and that sort of thing. So I think that what we see in this, what I noticed in this dashboard around Microsoft Viva Insights is that it's designed to help gauge how employees are feeling and using data that is, that is anonymized. So I think people, and I always worry a little bit that people worry about privacy and feeling tracked and things like that. So based on the information I read, the data here that's being collected is anonymized, and people can, sort of check like how you're feeling today, or you can help sort of manage your tasks. And you can get de-identified and aggregated collaboration data is what Microsoft is calling this. And they're using those insights to see how people are working and to see how engaged and connected people are overall. And I think that what those insights will show leaders, what they're designed to show leaders is, you know what? Daniel's a great guy, but I can see here, or actually it won't be personalized, right? But we can see that we're having struggles within the organization with this particular thing or whatever. And so I think it will allow leaders to kind of modify things based on the data that they're seeing.
Yeah, I think a couple of the things I really like too is that they're using the privacy security layers that are critical for anonymizing data at scale. But
Right.
however, on a personal level, the data you see about yourself is about you.
Yeah.
And I think for a lot of employees, understanding work habits, effectiveness, I remember, days at certain points, like I kind of get a feeling like I don't know if it was what I was eating or the way I do meeting schedules or just the early start. But I'd start to say like every day around the same time, I'd feel really foggy, like get really
Right.
fatigued. Um, and I even laugh like sometimes I'm like, I need a nap before I can finish whatever I'm working on. Even that 10 minutes though, maybe it's not actually a nap. Maybe it's just taking that 10 minutes to step out of your office,
Yeah.
go outside, get fresh air. You know, like you said, the watch maybe would tell you to stand up, but people become more productive. And also, giving you some sort of insights on your own habits of disruption.
Right.
We all
Right.
know, I mean, the data is pretty overwhelming that like people that use social media throughout the day, and we're guilty. You like Facebook a lot, I like Twitter a lot, but we all spend our time on different platforms, and it is really distracting in terms of getting in and out of work. And some of us do it better than others. Some of us
Yeah.
can bounce out and read an article and share it and come right back, and we're in the zone. Some of us, I mean, they say it could take like 15 or 20 minutes to
Right.
reconcentrate. And these are things that are sort of well documented, but do you know it about you? We're so good at like passing along statistics in a general sense, but when the
Right.
statistic is self imposed or self inflicting, we're kind of like, oh, it's not my thing. I mean, everyone else that goes on social, it really messes them up. But
Right.
but I'm good. So you know, I like a lot of that personal connected insight for people. Of
Yeah.
course, those anonymized pieces for management are great. We've been managing by CRM and ERP for a long time.
Right.
Tracking sales activities and workflows, project management tools, and that's the productivity side. But the human element is what's sort of missing. So this kind of takes those two things together. You have your CRM data, you have your project data, but what about the human data? And this is kind of what I look at. It's human experience data, and it's something that's really been lacking. So
Yeah.
that was the part of the four that stood out to me a lot. But I actually really kind of like, in a lot of ways, Shelly, it's kind of like a enterprise social network. I mean, and we've kind of tried this in some different ways over the years. There's Facebook for business and there's these different things. But I think really what deep down they're trying to do is, what would be a social network that still doesn't completely eradicate productivity in the workplace, that
Yeah.
thinks about the individual, that makes information discernible and knowledge accessible, but at the same time, it gives people the opportunity to self-reflect on their work and to become as productive as possible.
Yeah, and I think that have glossed over a little bit the module focused on learning in Microsoft Viva Learning. It's an app for Microsoft Teams. It launched in a private preview, so it's not completely out there yet. But what I think is so important, in addition to what you just said, is that we know that when it comes to digital transformation and success on that never-ending journey, having a culture of continuous learning is critical. Okay, and many organizations don't have that. And we know that from our research that what has happened with learning management is that people got really, really hot on learning management, like in the early 2000s. And then about 2008, they just stopped. And of course, we had other things going on in the economy then. But companies in many ways have backed off from learning programs. And we're paying the price for that. So I think that this is the Viva Learning is about creating a central hub where people can discover and share and assign and learn from people within their organization. And then also best in class content libraries. This is where LinkedIn's ownership or Microsoft's ownership of LinkedIn comes in, because LinkedIn has amazing learning programs. They're also featuring content from third-party providers, the organization's own custom content, and all of this is geared to make learning on a daily basis sort of a standard thing. And then the other cool thing about this is, again, you can personalize the learning. The content is personalized, and you can say, okay, my team focuses on this, and I can set up my own learning specific to the people on my team. And I think that's really pretty cool. I also see that some of the biggest learning management system providers like SAP SuccessFactors, Cornerstone, On Demand, and Saba have all announced that they are going to integrate with Viva Learning. So I think that's a big vote of confidence that this is really an amazing piece of functionality for Microsoft 365 and that whole platform and the offering, and how that really will serve people across the enterprise.
Yeah, there's a lot to be encouraged by here. Future of work has been brought to mind. We know the future is going to be a bit more hybrid. We really, I think, can sense that while there will be a normalcy again, and what will become our lives will feel just like normal, just like what was our lives. It probably will be a little more hybrid. We've learned
Yeah.
how to be productive remotely. We also do know that over time, I think there is a desire to reconnect and re-engage as humans. For some, that was days. Some have not seen anybody in like a year, and everybody's unique there. But the
Right.
technology provides a platform for flexibility. Um, And like you said, learning, understanding, connecting, and engaging. So this is a really sound trajectory. The uptake will be interesting. Monetization is still something to kind of I'm kind of curious about. How does a company like Microsoft benefit financially from this big investment?
Right.
Obviously, you're going to get workloads. You're going to get more use of Teams. There's some things that are indirect, but it doesn't look like it's an additional service that you're paying for. So it looks like it's something that's part of your M365 license, or it's a subscription now.
Yeah.
So it's a really promising thing, and I'm kind of interested to see how this next few months roll out. But it's if you're out there and you run a business, it's something to look at. If you're tracking the company in the business, it's something to pay attention to. I also believe, and we've seen inklings of this from Salesforce and other companies that have done things about future of work.
Right.
I expect this to become more prevalent among high tech, coming up with solutions to help address not just collaboration, but really the future of work and the way we
Yeah.
each work on a daily
Yeah.
basis.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, great conversation. And I'm glad we made time to hang out together today. And really looking forward to seeing where Microsoft goes with this Viva product, because it's really pretty cool.
Yeah, I'm excited to, and it was great seeing you. And I hope everybody enjoyed this. And subscribe and follow Shelly, because this is on her LinkedIn. And tune in again. We'll try to do this more often.
All right. See you later.